Young David would sit inside all day, cycling between rounds of fapping, League of Legends, and trips to the microwave. This was no way for a young man to be living. Present David spends his time walking, journaling, reading, studying, exercising, working, and even writing. He does all of the things that younger David would have seen as hard work. Young David tries to do the same activities, but he always falls out of it for some reason. He can never stay consistent with these things because he perceives it all as hard to do and unnatural, and he perceives it all to be work. Alright, present David enjoys what he does. He doesn't need to rely on constant external motivation to help him through his day, nor does he need to strain his willpower constantly. Yet he's really productive. Present David spends maybe an hour on his phone per week, whereas younger David couldn't even do an hour per day. Hell, he couldn't go maybe 2 hours without checking his phone. He didn't have any friends to message. He didn't even have a social media account. Yet he still used his phone so much? Present David cannot use his phone. Just the simple act of picking it up and looking at it, or just picking it up and holding it, disgusts him. He cannot take it. When I was younger, I was borderline obsessed with games like Minecraft, Smash Bros, Terraria, Torum Online, Splatoon, I already said Smash Bros, Mario Kart. There was a lot of different games that I was obsessed with, even Call of Duty for some time. Alright, and this was undoubtedly one of the most depressing periods of my life. Also one of the longest periods of my life, should I mention. I clearly had no respect for myself, and no one had respect for me. No one around me had respect for me. My mind would constantly be riddled with self-deprecating thoughts, and if it wasn't about my physical body, pimply face, greasy hair and fat rolls, then, my lack of muscle, then it was about my skills in the game. It was about my lack of personality and my lack of life direction. Now, do you remember when the loading screen would come on these games? Maybe in Minecraft when you were loading up the world, or, Terraria when you were going across the loading screen, or maybe it's like Skyrim when they transition. The black screen that would come on, you'd see the reflection in it. Do you remember the thoughts you would have as you're staring back at yourself? Chances are they were quite negative. These are the same negative thoughts that would haunt me for most of my childhood and teenage years. But truthfully, I am lucky. Many people never pull themselves together, and they live for much, much longer, or may never, ever get this stuff resolved. And we're seeing that nowadays when we look at some of the generations that grew up with video games, and it's really sad to see. So what was the transition? What did younger David do to turn his life completely, to evolve as a person and almost be completely unrecognizable? The truth is, young David had no fucking clue what he was doing. Young David would bounce from video to video in search of a solution for his problems. And quite honestly, what young David thought his problem was and what his problem actually had been were two completely separate things. Alright? There was a time when he would constantly fall prey to all the 7 things to do to see results now schemes. Then, after, dedicating countless time, energy, and resources, hundreds, and I mean hundreds of dollars, to these schemes, these diet plans, 12-week programs, coaching, services, apps, David came to the realization that there was no easy way out. it hurt him so much. And to think that all of his time and money and energy had been put to a complete waste. But unlike many, he didn't give up. He learned the ins and outs, or so he thought, of dieting. He learned what nutrition was, and he studied subjects like biochemistry, organic chemistry, biology, and just various other biological and nutrition-based related studies. In his spare time, that is, not even inside class. This was during the pandemic, actually. He spent even more money in completely optimizing his diet for ketosis, which is the process of your body using fat for fuel, and getting rid of whatever weight he could. His grocery bill got as high as $5,000 a month for him and him alone. And honestly, that's a generous number. I'm pretty sure I remember it being $700. To give you a perspective, $150 is about the normal for a single person. Young David, after a year of this super strict diet, fasting for days, 72 hours at a time usually, and eating these same meals, all based around their nutrient properties and hormonal effects and enzymatic properties and all this, ketosis jargon, rather than taste. He was eating bland vegetables that were steamed in the microwave. He was eating stale macadamia nuts. He was eating unseasoned beef and drinking apple cider vinegar and black coffee. And I'm truthfully, just a side note, I'm grateful for this time in my life because I can now eat anything and it tastes good. Like, that's just a side note, like an example of what I'll be talking about later in this video, but I can eat anything and it'll taste good. That's something I learned from this period. Something I can be grateful for. But rather than, he came to the realization that he could not do this, right? I could not live my life like this for the rest of, ever. And I had dwindled my savings. I had been working for 3 years previous to that. I had no expenses, and I was saving all of it. I dwindled that completely within like 7 months. I couldn't live life having mental breakdowns every week due to stressing out about the optimization of every little crumb to enter his mouth. So what could he do? I like this song. In the depth of his resulting binge eating phase and despair, he came across a podcast from Mind Pump Media, which went over dieting and mindsets. It happened again. Young David felt as if he wasted all of his time. The shame, the sadness, the guilt from throwing away so much money and time, especially when his family was in need. He was 16, 17, 15. He was the prime age of life where you should be going out and enjoying yourself. He was restricting himself from soda, from any kind of fast food, eating out, from any kind of tea, beverages. Only thing he could drink was water and occasionally apple cider vinegar and steamed vegetables, raw unseasoned beef, unseasoned salmon, and he didn't want to give up. He was doing all this in a time when his family was in need. His family was dirt poor, and he was spending $500 a month on groceries, supplements, and nutrition alone. He thought if he could just keep pushing, that he could achieve, what he had always wanted. Young David had been presented with a hard to swallow truth. Another hard to swallow truth, that is. He didn't want to give up, and his struggle was absolutely pathetic. I have to outline that because you won't look like a hero going through this. You will feel very pathetic. He would eat everything in sight. Not because he wanted to, but because he felt a strong gut urge. It felt like an adrenaline rush came over him when he would see food or when he would become anxious. Then he would find himself forcing himself to throw up everything that he just ate shortly after. He knew what he was doing when he was making these massive meals. He knew he wouldn't be able to stop himself, and he knew the pain he would experience when he bent over the banister, and when he'd be bent over the banister and he would be puking. He knew that the food would lose its taste after the second bite, and he was familiar with the obsessive compulsion to consume everything he could. Despite what it was doing to his body, the shame continued to eat away at him while he cooked. To give you a reference, we had a big 10-pound log of meat. I ate half of it. 5 pounds of meat and maybe 7, I don't remember exactly how many, but it was like 5 or 6 packs of tortillas, as well as 3 packs of hard shell tacos. And there was like 2 packs of cheese. Dude, that was only one instance. But whether he realized it or not, now young David found a new truth in fitness. The flaws of dieting and the importance of mindset, the importance of psychology, and the role that, your mind plays and all this. And he began looking for information on how to reverse diet, and if reverse dieting was even the right thing to do. He'd been steered wrong so many times in his life, he wasn't sure what to trust, and he felt so lost and stressed and scared. He just wanted to do good. Young David managed to lose over 90 pounds in as little as 5 months. He was terrified of seeing the numbers on the scale go back up. He was terrified of wasting the last 2 years of heartache and restriction. He didn't want to waste his time anymore. He was scared and life was getting away from him, he felt. He was already halfway through high school and behind on his goals. He wanted optimal results and was willing to put in the work, and he did. He lost 90 pounds. 60 of those pounds was in 3 months. Fortunately, David continued to gather information on the subject. He binge-watched pretty much all of the content on fat loss, bulking, cutting, nutrition, coaching tips, etc. Taking notes along the way. He learned the specific tools that could help him overcome his binge eating and the weird tips and tricks that you could learn. He learned that there was no specific diet that one should adhere to in order to become healthy. He learned that there was balance in everything, and though he still remained extreme on some fronts due to personal belief, like not drinking soda, not masturbating, no porn, anything like that, even no fast food, he found balance with those as well. Balance was something unknown to David at that point. David had been extremely extreme with everything he did. Completely cut out everything but water. He cut back on fast food, or completely cut it out for that fact. He cut out snacks, candy, even carbohydrates as a whole. Knowing absolutely nothing about carbs, he quickly went to work to trying to find out everything on carbs. What the best ones were, what they were, how much of a balance was, and etc. There are different applications even, like potatoes versus red potatoes versus broccoli, because broccoli is considered... What's the takeaway from all this? What have I been ranting about this whole video? He got the information he was looking for, and It wasn't quick. It took him nearly the better part of 3 months, but it was extremely valuable and has served him extremely well until this day, nearly a year later, as he continues to build on his understanding. The takeaway, as I mentioned, is that young David had no clue what he was going through and no clue what to do through any of this. There was no one he could turn to, no one he could relate to, and no one there to guide him. He had no role model to look up to, and certainly no correct path laid out for him. Everything he tried seemed to result in complete failure. Every time he got his hopes up, every time he was shot down, after dedicating serious time and resources to it. This is where people give up. This is the bottleneck of self-improvement, and you will feel sharp pain on this journey, and you will experience hurt. However, if you've read this far, chances are that you've probably understood the value of another person's experiences. For you, the first step has been taken. Next is to turn inward. Remember that all of these points, along with your self-improvement, maybe you're in one now. Like, all of these points along your self-improvement, think what you can take away from the experience. All of them. All of the points that you found yourself, all of the trouble that you found yourself in. Time cannot simply be wasted. Wasted time. That's not a thing. It has to be spent somehow. Right? Look back on your life. Understand where you have potential value hiding in your past. That you were unable to see before. As you learn and grow, as you develop deeper ideas and stronger questioning skills and self-reflection, you'll have new doors opened up to you, new perspectives to view from, and endless interpretations. There's always something. It's just that there's a barrier between you and it. There's a barrier that prevents you from unlocking it. If all it takes is one good idea to become successful and live a happy life, and all it takes is a handful of good ideas to become wealthy beyond belief, wouldn't you want to find out what barriers are holding you back from these lessons? You've already put in this time. You've already spent this amount of time of your life. Sure, you have all this, but don't you want to capitalize on what you've already spent? If you could increase the value of the things you've already done, wouldn't you want to do that? By spending this little bit of effort and this little bit of time now to be reflective and more self-aware, you're completely unlocking a new level of the skill of being introspective. A skill that opens up old memories and gives you new meaning to seemingly wasted parts of your life, to the bad parts of your life, to really negative parts of your life that you regret. So let's take a look back and try to find these barriers. They may seem surprisingly or seemingly invisible to you, but that's why it's so crucial to find and question these thoughts and beliefs. It may sound like a lot of work, which it kind of is, but I can assure you that nothing in self-improvement will give you as much of a return There's endless meaning in everything that you do. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. It is simply how you perceive it. Share your stories below or message me and I will help you find what it is that what that value is in your life that you might be missing. We're all going to make it. Stay on task.